Right, so Keir Starmer's loyal anti-ceasefire voters did his bidding last night whilst insulting our intelligence afterwards to excuse their actions. They aren't worthy of being called Labour MPs after this, I don't think. They're Starmer MPs. Like him, they'll vote according to which way the wind is blowing and in their own self-interest. Last night, calls for a ceasefire failed as Parliament overwhelmingly rejected the SNP motion calling for Parliament to back one, rather than humanitarian pauses, rather than being overtly on the side of Israel to continue to do what they are doing in Gaza and stand by the people of Palestine. Our representatives suck. The Tories we knew would back Israel. There's no surprises there. Not a single one backed the SNP amendment. But where Keir Starmer instead faced significant rebellion, he watered down his own hardline stance to vote against the SNP by instead whipping his MPs to abstain on support for a ceasefire, hoping that this would mitigate the damage. Well, 56 Labour MPs, the only ones worthy of the name going forwards, defied him, and he suffered 10 resignations, some seemingly quite surprising. That's 28% of his MPs that rebelled, though, so that is really quite damaging for a guy wanting to become Prime Minister, that he has rebels on that scale when he chooses to be more rancid than average. Totally self-inflicted as it is, though. But amongst the very worst were some Starmer MPs who said they would back a ceasefire and ended up not doing so. And there's a story behind that, apparently. There's a lot more to these results than just the fact the call for a ceasefire fell. Right, so last night the Tories united behind the position to keep on letting Israel bomb the living daylights out of Gaza instead of taking a stand for peace, and to hold the rogue apartheid state to account, and to the standards of international law for once in its existence. Because if Russia can be held to account for bombing Ukraine, then Israel should be as well for what it is doing to Gaza. There are no double standards in the law. There very much is in how our parliamentarians are choosing to follow it, despite what they say. Political soundbites without any real intent behind them. Israel has a right to defend itself, they say, as they apparently had no idea about the October 7th attack. A lie. Egypt had tipped them off. Yet they still know each and every civilian building and public infrastructure that Hamas are allegedly using as a base of operations in order to destroy churches, refugee camps, hospitals, and more. If that hasn't made you do a double take by now, I suggest you do some brain training. But of course the story of the ceasefire and the will they or won't they attitude to backing the SNP amendment to call for one ended up centred around Labour, because Keir Starmer's ardent, unquestioning and eternally loyal support for the State of Israel meant he'd split his own party on an issue that really should have been a no-brainer. The Tories are a rancid bunch. Of course they'll back Israel here, but Labour are supposed to be better than that, aren't they? Sadly, of course, we know they aren't, with Sir Keir Starmer still leading. He'd started out by threatening sackings if his front bench chose to support the SNP motion for a ceasefire. 18 of them had previously signed an early day motion supporting this, and when it became crystal, even to the brill-creamed one, that they were not going to back down over this, having already suffered one resignation by this point, he watered it down to an abstention. He was resolute that the SNP motion shouldn't be supported, though. It'll undermine us, and Scotland was his excuse. We're beating the SNP. Look at Rutherglen and Hamilton West. We're set to take seats off them, according to the polls. Now is not the time to tell Israel to stop killing innocent Gazans. That would be divisive to our electoral chances. That is the crux of the excuse. But let's make one thing abundantly clear. Starmer owes everything to pro-Israel interests. He's not going to do anything that threatens their ongoing support. Some of these would be frontbench rebels, though. Well, Starmer apparently had a plan with some of these to placate them, as far as their constituents go, publicly, by allowing them in the debate to extol their support for a ceasefire, to speak well in front of those cameras, to provide the clips and sound bites for the media, and that social media would pick up. As long as when it came to the vote, they still abstained. And a prime example of this was Helen Hayes, the Shadow Minister for Children and Early Years. Particularly perverse, I thought, given how many children have died in Gaza now. Over 4,100 of them so far killed. Hayes stood up in Parliament and said she supported a ceasefire in order to stop an unfolding genocide. And so vocal was she that it was for several hours after the vote that people thought she had indeed voted for the SNP amendment and sacrificed her job in the process. Her speech such that media people who were tracking would-be frontbench rebels counted her as a dead cert. As it turned out, she abstained. She put her job first when it came down to it, but not before doing a stellar turn for the cameras aimed at her constituents, obviously, because there's no other explanation for what she did. So they too will believe, or some of them will still believe, she backed the ceasefire when she actually didn't. It's pretty sick. But she wasn't the only disappointment on that score. Kim Ledbetter, the sister of murdered MP Joe Cox, was one rumoured to be voting for the ceasefire as well. She was saying as much. But in the end, just before the vote, she put out a video clip saying she wouldn't be backing it because she couldn't see the point of doing something that wouldn't make any difference. Sure, we don't have direct control over Israel, but we do have significant influence on the global stage. They get their missiles from the UK after all, but equally by Ledbetter's logic, it was pointless to back Starmer's extended humanitarian pauses as well then. Same point she made about a ceasefire stands there. So she did what she did for self-serving interests too. One other figure who abstained that is worth a mention is Nav Mishra, because he's in the Socialist Campaign Group of Labour MPs. He's supposed to be a solid lefty. What he actually is solidly loyal to Angela Rayner, who abstained. But this is worth mentioning because it exposes the problem with people putting so much faith in the SCG. They aren't all in it for altruistic reasons. They aren't all on the same page. They aren't all even proper lefties. And for this, Mishra should be booted out of the SCG. But they aren't known for flexing much muscle, are they? They're more into strongly worded letters. Of course, 56 Labour MPs did in the end back the SNP motion, which is a not insignificant rebellion against Starmer's appalling pro-Israel position. 10 frontbenchers resigned of the 17 that signed that ceasefire early day motion. Those who showed some principle, those who put their pet names to paper and followed it up with a vote. Or gave the appearance of it anyway. Paula Barker, Naz Shah, Afzal Khan, Yasmin Qureshi, Mary Kelly Foy, Rachel Hopkins, Sarah Owen, Dan Carden, Andy Slaughter and Jess Phillips. For those shocked at Phillips being on this list, she has a huge Muslim population in her constituency, and you can't hold a frontbench position if you no longer hold your own seat. She was looking after her own backside here, make no mistake about that. The 7 who could sign the EDM but couldn't bring themselves to actually vote for something they put their name to were Kim Ledbetter, Matt Western, Nav Mishra, Rushanara Ali, Seema Malhotra, Taiwo Otawemi, Tan Daisy and Helen Hayes. They owe serious answers to their constituents over how they in particular have acted since the latest atrocities began and how they can justify flip-flopping as they have, because if you're going to play that it would have been divisive card, then you aren't thinking of the innocent victims here at all, just your own ambitions and a potential future Labour government. It insults our intelligence to say that line. It is grubby. It is dishonest. And people angry at this result, angry that we aren't being properly represented, largely thanks to an electoral system that ignores most of our votes, aren't going to forget it. The humanitarian pause is stupid. Goodness knows I've both slammed it and poked fun out of it in recent videos. But it is also an idea that has been rejected by numerous global peace organisations and humanitarian agencies, from UNICEF to the World Health Organization, the World Food Programme, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and more. The list is growing. Stopping things for a few hours just to get aid in before that aid can then be targeted itself is just stupid and solves nothing when the fighting and the killing just carries on. If you can sleep at night having voted for that and thinking that'll do, you're twisted. Labour MPs under Keir Starmer, along with all the Tories who voted against the ceasefire, including the Northern Irish ones and the DUP, 4 of those shameless Burks opposed to ceasefire too, are stains on humanity. Those who abstained are no better, too cowardly to stand up and be counted. Literally. Labour MPs can make as many excuses as they like, but it is how you vote that counts. This is one vote that none of us should ever forget, and how MPs chose to act needs to be remembered come the time for us, all of us, to vote again for them. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Please do have your say on this in the comments below and be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation where Starmer recently sacked a Jewish staffer over his pro-Palestinian stance, showing it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, nothing actually to do with Judaism, and everything to do with acquiescing to Israel where Starmer is concerned. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.